another Houston Chronicle Live. This is truly a live event, folks, because just I think 2 minutes ago, Kirk Bohls walked through the Houston Chronicle newsroom and was getting his laptop set up just a minute to spare. So yeah, with good reason. There was actually a UT&M event right before this. Is that correct, Kirk? So he was coming straight from a news event, and we have all, we're going to tell you all about that today. But first, if you can, for those of you who are joining us, we have this little Houston Chronicle Live tradition. We love to see just where you're tuning in from. So, in this one in particular, I'd love to see if there's any Austinites in the area. If you can kind of just drop in the chat which neighborhood you're joining in from in Houston or across Texas. We just love to see that. Oh, someone from Scottsdale, Arizona. That's interesting. Katie. All right. We got a lot of Katie fans here north of Austin, Angleton. Very cool. UT alum from Charlotte. That's great. And actually, yeah, if you are a UT alum or if you're just a Longhorns fan, we'd love to hear that about that too. This is kind of actually, it occurred to me, Reed, this is probably the first time we've had on our Zoom 3 UT alumni hosting a Zoom together. So and it's not quite burnt orange, but I wore orange today.
Looking good.
Yes. All right. UT. Oh, wow. Alum 1978. UT and Wild Punch alum, UT MPA accounting alum. This is great to see. Round Top. So then we'll just give everyone about 1 more minute to join the Zoom. Keep those comments coming. I just love seeing what connection you have to the great University of Texas.
Coming out of the woodwork.
Yes. Oh, Kirk, it looks like you have some longtime readers from the Statesman.
Come aboard. Come aboard. Sign up.
There you go. No.
That's right.
Well, I have to confess, I'm not quite as experienced as Kirk, but I'm close. But I can remember starting out at the Daily Texan as an aspiring sports journalist, and going to my first UT football practice to cover practice, and stood there with Fred Akers was the coach, and Kirk was asking questions, and I somehow thought that we could do better at the Daily Texan than the Austin American Statesman and Kirk, and we were proven wrong. But anyway, no, it was I think over the years, Kirk has been a great friend to all students who've come through the Daily Texan to help them in their careers, and has just been a great example of someone who's fair and honest, and does everything the right way. And I know now as sports editor at the Chronicle, I'm very happy that Kirk has joined us. He's still living in Austin, and he's, for those of you who had read Kirk over the years in the Statesman, you'll probably see a lot of the same good content. It'll just be at a different web address or in a different newspaper. So I appreciate all you here today and joining us.
We can go ahead and just get things started. Reed, why don't you go ahead and kick things off? We're at 4 minutes after the hour.
Sure. Well, yeah, Kirk was in town in Houston today. Texas and Texas A&M, you all know, are going to start playing football again in the fall. But like with anything, they're going to have a corporate sponsor for the game. So that brought Kirk to town, and so both the athletic directors were there today, right?
Exactly. What's a sporting event if you don't have a title sponsor?
Yeah.
Would it really exist?
Yeah. No, exactly. So Kirk, with Texas going into the SEC, a lot of extra excitement there. How do you feel they're going to do in the new conference?
I think they're going to do great. I really do. And I don't know if I would have said this, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when Sark was just in his second year. But first of all, let me just say thank you, Reed, for hiring me and bringing me aboard with great people like yourself and Jennifer. And I'm thrilled to be with the Chronicle. And I'm glad that you took a chance on a rookie and brought him aboard. So, but it's funny, the whole SEC guys, it's like, I spoke at the Headliners earlier this week on Tuesday, And I don't remember the buzz and anticipation for a season, quite like this one. I mean, I almost went back to like 1969, when they were in the middle of their 30-game win streak. But just going into a new conference with all those exciting brands and new teams and new places to go, and then Texas obviously coming off a college football playoff for the first time in their history. It's just, corresponding and coming together at just the right time. So it's just, I don't know when the last time I've seen this much excitement.
Yeah. Well, one of our readers he's a little worried about the SEC. He says, because it's so much tougher than the Big 12. But
come on, piece of cake. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it's the Big 12 was, certainly had other good teams in it, but the SEC is just going to be different,
Right.
almost strong every week. So
yeah, just that weekly grind. It's like you can't take anybody for granted, and that speaks to excitement level. Not to denigrate the great Big 12, but quite frankly, Reed, the Longhorn Nation they couldn't get worked up over playing Kansas State and Iowa State and West Virginia again. So, and I think this team and this program's feeding off, that energy right now. I mean, all the season tickets are sold out. All they have left are some individual tickets that maybe some of the visitors might return. So, it's the anticipation is kind of at an all-time high. But you raise a good point, Reed. I don't ever worry about Sark getting up for big games like the Alabama game. They came within a Ryan Watts sack of going 2-0 against Alabama these last 2 years, and may well have gone 2-0 against Oklahoma if they'd had a little better 2-minute defense. So, but sometimes you worry about maybe those non-big games. When Mississippi State comes in, maybe a Kentucky, Vanderbilt, things like that is where you might be able to stub your toe, because other than maybe Vanderbilt, there's no bad teams in the SEC.
Sure. Well, and yeah, if anyone has questions, please drop them into that chat, and we'll ask away with Kirk. But so here's one. So which road stadium will be the hardest for them to win in, you think?
Well, obviously not Tuscaloosa. I think they've checked that box already. It's probably going to be A&M this year, but I think year in, year out, probably LSU, Baton Rouge, Death Valley. I've been there a couple times to cover A&M games over there. And that's like a venue unto itself. I mean, you're going in, it's like another world, I think, when you go into LSU for a night game. And probably the only one that I've been to that really kind of compared to that was Ohio State. But I've been to every stadium in the old West Division. There aren't divisions this year, but I haven't been to hardly any of the East Division, like Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to be great, and that's one I'm really looking forward to going to see the checkerboard Enzo. But I would probably say, A&M this year, but LSU, moving forward.
Yeah. So one thing that we've, Texas has, had injuries already in camp at running back. And I know that what you've written is that, Sark is positive and is, confident in who he has. How do you see, how big an impact will the running back situation have?
Well, losing C.J. Baxter is the big blow because he was the biggest running back of them all, and he was like 220 pounds and a very good and willing blocker, besides being a good runner. And so they're going to lose that as far as that pass blocking skill. I think Jadon Blue's terrific. I think he'll go over 1,000 yards this season. What it does, losing Baxter as well as Christian Clark, the true freshman from Arizona. They're just so thin there now. They only have 3 scholarship backs. One of them's Jarrett Gibson, a freshman who's never played in a college game. Trey Wisner, who's played a lot on special teams, is there too. But now they don't really have any margin for error. They can't really afford another running back loss. So Sark told us last week he's still open to the portal. You can still get somebody into school out of the transfer portal. I'm sure it's pretty slim pickings, but
yeah.
I don't know, but as long as Jadon Blue's still healthy, I think they're going to have a really good running game.
Mhm. Um, so, with recruiting, obviously that's a big thing now. And they've known they're going to be in the SEC for a couple of years, but
And
do you think that's really changed the type players they're getting at all, or the approach to recruiting?
oh, without question, it's like, and that's the one thing that they've robbed from A&M now, because A&M could say we're the only school in Texas that's in the SEC. So if you want to play in the Premier League and all of college football, you need to come to College Station if you're a Texas kid. And now Texas has kind of borrowed that page from A&M, and so yeah, everybody wants to play in the SEC because that is the conference. You look at the national titles that they won, was it like 5 out of the last 7 years, something like that. And that's your entree to the NFL, the next level. So I think it's gonna speak volumes in, opening doors for Texas. That and the combination of, the 12-2 record last year. I think it's just Texas is really joining at the perfect time when interest in the SEC and also the Big Ten is at, all-time high.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're really real showing up great in recruiting, Reed.
Yeah. Well, SEC and Big Ten, the way realignment has gone, it's almost like they are the two conferences now. Or the
Exactly.
only, no offense to Big 12 or the ACC, but it's like they've really taken
Right.
it to another level.
Well, how strong is the ACC when your best two programs won out?
Yeah.
Clemson, Florida State, their lawyers are going through the contract with fine tooth comb, see if they could get out of there. So, but you're
Yeah.
right. It in practicality, it's kind of a power too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have a fellow Taylor Duck who has
Oh,
joined the
nice.
conversation and would like to know if which player you think will have the most impact this season.
The one that I've penciled in is probably Anthony Hill Jr., their sophomore middle linebacker. I think this guy's got star written all over him. I think he can line up anywhere. He's going to be an elite pass rusher off the edge at times. But middle linebacker is his natural position where he played in high school in Dallas. So I look for him to kind of be the breakout, and it won't surprise me at all if he ends up with an All-American season.
Mhm. Defense, speaking of defense, they lost two of their big linemen, who just filled up the middle last year. Um, what do you see as the strength of the defense this year? Is it linebacker or?
Well, I don't know. David Gabenda is the other linebacker because they usually just use the two linebackers, and he's a veteran, a senior. He's been there, it seemed like forever. But I really think until we know what the secondary does, and they were not good last year. We just have to go back to the Sugar Bowl to see all the warts that they had when Michael Penix Jr. had 430 yards and 2 touchdowns and was never touched. So that was the difference in that game. But I think probably on defense, Reed, the depth in the defensive line. And even though Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweater both gone, both first 2 round draft picks, I think they've probably got more depth there. Ethan Burke and Baron Sorrell on the edge at defensive end, and they got this Trey Moore from UTSA, the transfer, and he's not huge, but he's very fast and twitchy. He had 14 and a half sacks for UTSA last year and had 22 over 2 years. So I think they're going to play a lot of people. They got 3 transfers from Arizona. And then they got a couple of seniors in Alfred Collins from Bastrop and Vernon Broughton that kind of been waiting for the light to go on for those two guys. And even though they won't have those two pillars, those two anchors right in the middle, I think overall across the whole defensive line, it may be better even.
Mhm. One thing, another reader was asking a little bit more on Jaden Blue, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but he didn't finish his high school. He kind of sat out the last part of his high school season
Right.
to rest up for colleges. Is that a help for him? And you think at all in terms of, I don't know, durability or will he be able to last a full season, you think?
I think over the long term, Reed, that is an asset for him because there's one thing about that position is that, running backs can get old pretty fast. And there's only so much tread on those tires. And, a perfect example is that Cedric Benson. I mean, he was just a workhorse at Texas for 4 years. And then, in the pros, and he didn't have the longevity. And he also had a knee injury with the Chicago Bears. But so I think that probably works in his favor now that he did sit out that senior year. So did Quinn Ewers, who
Mhm.
went to Ohio State a year early and
Yeah.
before coming to Texas. So
Mm.
I especially think in running, that's why I've always thought running backs should go pro whenever they can after that third year, just because
Mhm.
their longevity is not like other positions. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not really worried about Jadon Blue. He hasn't really, CJ Baxter's the one that had an assortment of injuries last year,
Right.
not Jadon Blues. So yeah, I think it probably works in his favor now, Reed.
Yeah. So another reader was, as you mentioned, Ewers. Where do you think, depending on how his season goes in the history of Texas quarterbacks, where do you feel he might eventually fit in?
Well, he better win a national championship if he's going to supplant Vince Young, and we'll see if he does that. I'm sure this is his swan song. I can't imagine him coming back for another year after this one. If Arch Manning fans will have a riot in the streets if
Mhm.
Arch doesn't get on the field too soon. I really do think Reed, he's been an excellent quarterback, threw like 3,400 yards last year and 22 touchdowns and only 6 picks. And if he stays on that trajectory, I think he could be a 4,000 yard passer. There have been less than 100 of those in college football history, and they got a whole new cast of wide receivers that he's got to build some trust and rapport with. But I think Arch Manning is going to be the better quarterback in the long term. But I think he's underestimated the value that he's done and bringing him to this level. And I think he's just poised for a great year this year.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, speaking of quarterbacks, so Reader was said that Colt McCoy always struck him as a genuinely nice guy. Um, just behind the scenes, in a sense, who was like in your years there the nicest star player? If that's
Wow.
how to figure
Well,
something like that out.
yeah, don't get asked that one very much. I would say, I've only been covering them. This will be my 52nd year to cover them, so I haven't seen that many. But really at the top of the list is Bijan Robinson, and not just to be a victim of the recent history, but he was probably the nicest and most humble kid. He would come to press conferences, shake everybody's hands, and ask how they're doing, and he was as genuine an article as there ever was. One of my favorites all time is Randy McEacher, and the quarterback who was the third stringer that came in the Oklahoma game in 1977 when they came within a whisker of winning a national championship that year in Fred Akers' first year. He has always been, one of my big time favorites too. And I like Cedric Benson, the late Cedric Benson. I thought he was, like I said, just the old reliable workhorse grinder, get you the tough yards, and spoke his mind. I remember one time I asked him, "Well, would you rather beat Oklahoma or would you rather win the Heisman?" And Cedric Benson didn't even pause. They said, "Well, I'd rather win the Heisman because that's for the lifetime." And and I know he got savaged by a big section of the Longhorn fans, but I applauded his honesty because a lot of people in Texas have beaten Oklahoma, but only two of them have won the Heisman Trophy. So he was always a big favorite of mine too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so another question, just and you had mentioned the secondary a little bit. Um, the SEC, you used to think of them as a running league, but now they pass as much as everybody else does.
Really do.
And there's been a history of great receivers recently at Georgia and Alabama, and LSU.
Right.
How do you is it possible to assess how the secondary will match up with some of those? Because I think most of our last impressions is seeing the Washington receivers go all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, and that spoke to the pass rush too. When you don't, not only do they not sack Penix, they didn't lay a finger on him really for the entire game. And those the secondary and the pass rush work in concert, or they'd better. Because if you're not putting the quarterback on the ground, you're not harassing him, pressuring him into early throws if he's always throwing on time. And you can't cover those receivers forever. And a lot of times Penix would scramble out of there. So, but you're right, Reed, and I wrote about it a little bit this week on Michael Taft, the safety. That, they ranked 116th, excuse me, in pass defense last year. That's not good.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned, I was looking at the Phil Steele magazine, and his top 4 quarterbacks, he had a first, second, third, and fourth team All-American. Carson Beck was the first team quarterback. Jalen Milroe from Alabama was the second one. I think Dylan Gabriel, the OU quarterback who's now at Oregon, was third, and Quinn Ewers was the 4th string quarterback. So you have 3 of the top 4 quarterbacks on his magazine list. They're all in the SEC and all good passers. Milroe is getting more accomplished as a passer. So yeah, they've got a lot of balance. And I think, Reed, the Big 12 was a lot more run oriented, than the SEC. Now they have great running backs too. They have great everything, but I think you're right. You're going to see a lot of good quarterbacks in this league.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple of non-football questions.
Okay.
And I know you've written a lot about him lately, but Jim Schlossnagle, the new baseball coach, and he certainly will be well compensated with his new contract. Certainly the Aggies weren't happy with how things went with that, but how do you think he'll do at Texas?
I would say he's going to do phenomenal. And I've always been a big Schlossnagle fan when he was at TCU. And, I don't know if you can name 1 or 2 or 3 coaches in college baseball that are any better than him. He's a detailed guy. And one thing he's going to do at Texas, there's going to be some growing pains because Texas wasn't great last year, as we all know. They'd kind of gotten away from pitching as their anchor, their foundation for the program, and that's what it was built on. Go back to Bib Falk and Cliff and Augie, and they'd kind of gotten away from that. And David Pierce, his predecessor, had fired a couple of pitching coaches. Woody Williams, the U of H guy, lasted just 1 year, and then he took over the whole pitching reins as his own pitching coach. And I thought that was a big gamble and a big mistake. So I think Schlossnagle and Max Weiner, the pitching coach that he brought in from the Seattle Mariners, who's a top-notch pitching coach, they're going to get it back to where they have dominant pitching. And, I wouldn't look for them to win the SEC next year. And I don't know how much they'll be in the contention because, like I said, they lost some people, but they got Jalen Flores back at shortstop and Max Blue, the Big 12 Player of the Year in right field. But they got to patch up that pitching staff and do that in a hurry. But I think he'll do great.
And then, a couple of basketball questions. How do you
Okay.
feel about Rodney Terry? How do you think they will fit in SEC basketball?
I love Rodney Terry. I wish they would have been a little more proactive in the portal. They had a great team his first year when he took over for Chris Beard, and made it to the Elite Eight, and I think would have gotten to the Final Four if Dylan Dessou hadn't hurt his ankle and foot in the middle of the NCAA tournament. So they've got some good players. They went out of Arkansas Marks, and they got a couple of bigs, one of them from Indiana State. I don't know if they have the front court that they really need to power through. The kid Shedrick from Virginia was hurt a lot. He had back and shoulder issues. So I worry a little bit about their front court. And this will be a big year for Rodney. I'm not saying it's a make or break year, but you look at the coaches that Chris Del Conte hires, or mentioned Schlossnagle, you better get it done, and you better get it done in a big way, because he hires people like Sark, who's in the playoff, Mike White, who's
Right.
been the College World Series women's softball twice and losing only to Oklahoma. Floreal, the track coach, has won a couple of national championships. So I root for Rodney Terry. He's a great guy. I think he's a very good coach. I just wish his recruiting would step up a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, this was kind of a question here, which was one of these plays we talked about last night when we were chatting some, but turning to the quote negative side, but what's the most depressing play in UT football history? Is it Craig Curry and the punt in the Cotton Bowl, or
Yeah.
Blake Gideon dropping that interception, or or not being able to stop Michael Crabtree there? So
Yeah, there are all kind of sins on that Texas Tech play. Hate to even dredge up that memory. I would probably say Craig Curry's fumble punt, because had they beaten Georgia, I think Fred Akers would have won the national championship. And to lose 10-9, I know Jeff Ward, I think, missed a field goal and kicked a few. But yeah, they were just primed to be off and running before that disastrous game against Georgia. So, but Blake Gideon's not too far away, or
yeah,
Earl Thomas, who should have made the tackle on the sideline. I don't know what he was thinking there, but the thing is, if they beat Georgia, they're going to be the national championship. If they beat Texas Tech, they're going to get in the playoffs, and you just don't know how they're going to win. But I've always felt like that was Mac's second best team in 2008, and the one that lost in Texas Tech and
mhm.
got edged out for the playoffs, because that was when, Colt was, set a record like 70% completion rate. He was the leading rusher on the team. They didn't even have a tight end. So I would put Craig Curry number one and Blake Gideon, Earl Thomas, just
Yeah.
below that at number two. But those are the only two bad plays in history.
Yeah, yeah, just two. Yeah. I know, the way things have changed a little bit. You don't get to watch as much practice as you used to. How much have you got to see Arch Manning play, and what can you assess of his play? Is he like his uncles at all?
He's faster. He's more mobile. He embodies all those qualities of Peyton and Eli, and probably better, at least on paper. I mean, this guy's huge. He's 6'4" plus. I don't know if he's 235 or 40, but he is solid and so tall. He's the real deal, and we haven't seen him a whole lot. And I did ask Sarkis a couple weeks ago. I said, "Do you feel like you have to play Arch some in those first few games in September?" Because, he threw 5 passes last year, none of them in a meaningful game. And Malik Murphy's now the starter at Duke. So behind Quinn, and Quinn's gotten hurt and missed 5 games in 2 years. So, and he said, yeah, of course, we need to get him some reps. And I'd like to see him play Arch in the first half of Colorado State, Louisiana Monroe, and UTSA. Usually they don't do that because, they're always worried about injury and that sort of thing. But I just think, when you play him in the fourth quarter and he's handing off mostly and the bullets aren't live, I think you don't get much value in that. So, but I've said and written this, that I think Arch Manning will be better than Quinn Ewers as a collegiate and a pro. And Quinn Ewers is off to a damn good start.
Yeah. Now, so Texas plays Michigan this year. Have you ever done a game at the Big House?
I have not. That's on my checklist. I want to go to the Big House. I've never been to Ann Arbor. And right below that, I would probably put Between the Hedges in Georgia and Athens. I've never been to Tennessee. I would say those are probably the top 3 stadiums on my list. I would say I've been to Ohio State a few times and covered Ohio State, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan, and that was a trip. I've been to LSU, as I've said, been to Alabama now, but I would say, Michigan was probably at the top of the list. So, what is it, 110,000? So
Yeah.
I'm just hoping it's snowing. I'm not looking for snow on September 7th, but I can at least hope for it.
Okay. Well, how do Michigan obviously won the national championship here in Houston, actually. I know you were here for that game. How do you think Texas and Michigan match up? Michigan obviously with changes, new quarterback, new coach.
Right. Yeah. And they lost 10 offensive starters. So this is going to be a brand new Michigan offense. And Alex Orji, a Texas kid, dual threat quarterback, is, I understand, probably going to get that starting job. The problem, I do think, I do worry a little bit, Reed, and all you out there, is that people are sleeping on Michigan a little bit too much because they lost so many people and Jim Harbaugh is gone. Sharon Moore is the new head coach, but Michigan might have the best defense in the country. Mason Grant's one of the best defensive linemen. Will Johnson at cornerback is probably the best cornerback in college football. They've got about 7 or 8 stars back on that defense, and I think Donovan Edwards is a really good running back replacement for Blake Edwards. So I think it's going to be a really good game. It's going to set the tone for both teams' seasons, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's a fourth quarter game and somebody wins like 20-17. I think it'll be a pretty low scoring game.
Yeah. Uh, Kind of switching back to the SEC, they haven't quite announced their plans for how they're going to do schedules for football. They've got the same model in place for this year and next year, but they're still trying to decide 8-game versus 9-game and all the various rivals. Do you have a sense? Is there any way to have a sense of how that may shake out?
Well, that's a real sticking point with me. It's like, when you have 8 games, and which is ridiculous in my book. I mean, you're the big bad SEC. You can't play 9 conference games like the Big Ten and like the Pac-12 would have. And if it just means more, it should mean more and have better games. So I asked both Chris Del Conte and Trev Alberts, the ADs today, what they think about it, and they're still hopeful, and they both want to play this Aggie game. But if you stick with 8 games, the thinking is you would only have one permanent rival. And Texas' permanent rival would be Oklahoma. It would not be A&M, it'd be Oklahoma. So you need that 9 games so you have, at least 2, if not 3 permanent rivals on your annual schedule. But Trev wants it, Chris Del Conte wants it, and I sure hope they get it done. It'd be a shame to, we wait 12 years and it finally come back, and then we're going to play 2 years and take 2 years off. I hope that's not true, because, to me, sports is rivalries. And so I'm just tickled that it's back this year, and I'm hopeful, that they'll, reasonable heads will get together and they'll figure out we need to go to 9 games.
Yeah. Speaking of rivalries, we've Oklahoma, obviously a Texas rival, and they're joining the SEC as well. Just, maybe just because of where we are, but we haven't really heard a lot of chatter on how OU may fare this year in the SEC. What do you think?
We really haven't. And it's so funny because my colleagues and I always kind of laugh about it. It's like, yeah, Texas going to the SEC, and what's that other team? Oh, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's going to the SEC. Like, everybody's about Texas, and a lot of that has to do with last season, but it just seemed like they're kind of the forgotten team. Jackson Arnold's their sophomore quarterback, a young, talented guy. I think he had some accuracy issues. I've read some reports of their training camp that, he's thrown some interceptions. I know they had one injury to a receiver. I think their defense is going to be much better than their offense. Danny Stutzman, their linebacker, is kind of the anchor of that defense. So I think they'll be very competitive on that side of the ball. They'll have more growing pains offensively, and they've got a tough schedule. For any of you guys that are Sooner fans, they go to Missouri, they go to LSU, they go to where else do they go to? They go to Auburn. They've got a really tough schedule, and then they host Alabama and play Texas. So they got a lot tougher schedule than Texas did. So I've got them in my top 20. They're around 15 or something like that, but they kind of feel more like an 8-4 team, maybe 9-3 if everything went well for
them. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, Florida State and Clemson, maybe not happy. Do you have a sense, will SEC stay at 16 teams, or are they, what do you think?
Well, every time we ask Greg Sankey, the commissioner, about it, he says, we're not looking to expand. We're happy with the 16. A lot of people think if they ever did expand and get into, the thinking is you want to get into new states, not states where you already are. and Florida State and Clemson would you kind of duplicate because Florida and South Carolina are already in the SEC. So I've always been told that if they really wanted to branch out and go beyond 16, they would want North Carolina and Virginia. They're two strong academic schools, two very solid football, if not great, and really top-notch basketball programs. So I'm scared expansion just never going to slow down, Reed. It
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like once we got into it and got our feet wet, it just went crazy with the
Yeah.
Pac-12 being dissolved. So I would never say never. I
Yeah,
just we don't end up with two conferences. I think that'd be a shame if we had SEC and the Big Ten.
yeah,
I know what we have 134 FBS teams and probably realistically, probably only have like 70 or maybe 80 that truly belong in that upper division. But
yeah,
I don't know. I still feel like there's a place for the little guy.
yeah. So obviously you've covered coaches from Daryl Royal to Fred Akers. I won't mention a couple of others to Mac Brown to Steve Sarkisian, but yeah. So how do you kind of compare the leadership that you see in some of those guys in between, say, Daryl and Mac and Sark?
Yeah, well, Daryl was the master, and I covered him a little bit when I was a student, like you were, Reed, when I was at the Daily Texan. But I only covered him as the main beat writer for 1 year, and that was his last year in 1976. And I've always felt like he's kind of been forgotten on a national scale, and that's a shame because I mean, he did so much for the game, he and Emery Ballard bringing in the wishbone and the flip-flop offense. He brought in the first academic brain coach is what they called him, Lan Hewlett, who was a science teacher from Lockhart, and we see where that has gone. And so he was an innovator. He was like the funniest guy this side of Abe Lemons, and just I was just in awe of being around him. So Fred Akers was kind of a very underrated, very driven guy out of Blytheville, Arkansas, self-made man, like 13 siblings in his family. And he and Daryl clashed somewhat, and he kind of wanted to separate from Daryl. Daryl was the AD for 3 years when Fred was here. So Fred never really got his due, came close twice to winning, national championship, had his trouble in bowl games, but I always liked Fred. Dave McWilliams had staff problems, probably wasn't ready to be the head coach at Texas, had only that 1 year tutelage as head coach at Texas Tech. John Mackovic did some good things. He beat Nebraska in '96 to win the first Big 12 championship game. So I'll give him that. I don't know what else he did. We had a lot of skirmishes. He called me, you know what you are, Kirk? You're a scoundrel. And I said, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so we had a lot of run-ins and scrapes, but Mac Brown was the second coming of Darrell Royal, and he was the original CEO. And that's what Charlie Strong and Tom Herman were not. And I think, Sark's kind of more of a blend like that. Mac Brown was, Joe Everyman. Everybody liked Mac and he'd talk your ear off. And the one thing I'll give Sark is that he's not only recruiting well and coaching well, he's developing players. And that's what Texas has been missing because his first year, when they went 5-7, they had a fat zero players drafted by NFL teams. The next year was 5. Last year was 11. This year, I think it might be 12 to 15. So he's not only recruiting and well and coaching well, he's developing players. And I think his leadership style is really fit well so far in the first 3 years.
Um, so I guess, and kind of flipping back to baseball and history a little bit, we were talking about the football coaches. How about, Gus and Augie? You spent a lot of time with both of them in baseball.
Yeah, I love Gus and Augie. I'll just unabashedly say that I love both those guys, and I'm a big football, college baseball, pro baseball guy. Those are probably my top loves, and and baseball is just such a different animal, like in football, you mentioned practices. I think we've seen 4 practices this fall. The first day of practice, we got to see an hour. We haven't had an hour in ages. I thought Sark must be in a coma or something to let us stick around for an hour. The next 3, we got 15 minutes. It was always less than 20 minutes. So we got to see them do calisthenics, and they looked very good during doing jumping jacks and up downs and stuff like that. But you don't get to see a whole lot. But this is a long answer to your short question. With Augie and Gus, you're out of baseball every day. You know what it's like. Our baseball writers. You just kind of live and breathe it. It's just a different season, different. I mean, you get to know the players so much better. And Augie and Gus, they were just iconic, legendary figures. Both won 2 national championships at Texas, and I don't know. I could go on and on about what good people they were, and I just love both of those men.
Yeah. So, baseball, they're talking about changing the number of scholarships,
Yeah.
I mean, and that there's just so many different ramifications of that, not just for baseball, but other sports. Is there any way to know yet what might happen or how that
Yeah.
may impact things?
When I interviewed Schlossnagle last week, he said it's probably going to be 34-man rosters. Right now they have 40-man rosters. And I think they had either 46 or 47 players on their current roster. So, everything with college athletics is just being radically altered before our very eyes. And even football, we may go to 105 scholarships from 85, and that could affect the walk-ons. But yeah, it's right now in college baseball, they have 11.7 scholarships. So almost everybody's on a partial scholarship. Like, I don't know, Roger Clemens, he was probably on a half scholarship, if you can believe that, a 7-time Cy Young Award winner. So, and they may go to 34 full scholarships, which is, a lot more expensive. And one thing is good, it might keep some of the high school players in college instead of going straight to the major league. So that could be a good thing. But, those 6 spots that you might not have, those players may go to other SEC schools that aren't the powers. So you're going to see even more parity about it. So, yeah, the college landscape is just scary right now. College coaches are scared. They're lamenting the NIL and the transfer portal because everything's just turned upside down. And it's really hard to predict, the future for any of those sports. And like you said, the ramifications, has Title IX ramifications. You have to have equal numbers for men and women. And if you add 105, you add 20 more football. I guess you had to add 20 more rowers to the UT women's rowing team. So you got to make that up because that's federal legislation and mandatory.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So talking about coaches, Nick Saban is not going to be on the sidelines. He'll be
I
in the
heard
booth.
that rumor. I heard that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how does I don't know, the loss of Saban, how does that going to be felt in college football, you think?
Oh, that's going to be such an intriguing question. It really is because, I mean, to me, he's the greatest coach in team sports in history. I mean, you can talk about John Wooden you want, or Coach Krzyzewski or Bobby Knight or whoever. I just think for him to have the success and what he win? 6 national championships and another one at LSU. I mean, he's unlike anything, and they never got complacent. He was willing to change. Remember, he lamented the air raid. He was like, "Oh my God, he lost to Johnny Manziel. Is this what college football has come to?" And then he went to some air raid elements, and Jalen Milroe running all over the place, and Tua was running all over the place. So he's the most adaptive coach maybe in college sports history. And and his rosters keep changing. He does it with different generations of recruits. And remember, his coaching staff, he was always in transition. So I just have so much respect for him and the job he did. I hate to see him leave. And here's my question too, Reed. How many wins was Nick Saban good for in a year that Kalen DeBoer or any other coach wouldn't have won that game? Because they weren't winning every game 35-7, even though it may have seemed like it. So I hate that he's gone because he was and always will be the gold standard to me.
Yeah. So on couple of other sports chatter. Mike, you mentioned Mike White, softball.
Right.
Oklahoma is still Oklahoma, but do you see a national championship for softball at some point?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, if I don't know if Patty Gasso, retires, maybe, Mike White's best chance, because I mean, you talk about a powerhouse, just oh my God, they just crush the ball, then they get great pitching. They got the transfer from Oklahoma State and they ride her to a fourth straight national championship. And softball's just taken off too. It's like going crazy. I don't know if you saw Texas Tech just I was gonna say hired. They signed the Stanford pitching transfer, Najari Kennedy, and they gave her 1.2 million in NIL in college women softball. Did we ever think? I mean, that's like quarterback money, and that's how important a pitcher is, to softball. So yeah, I got a world of respect for Mike White. He knows what he's doing, and boy, that Aggie Longhorn series last year was that was about as compelling a series as I've ever seen. But I think he will win a national championship at Texas. I really do.
Yeah. Tillman Fertitta, the UH Board of Regent and Rockets owner and
Right.
a man with a lot of money. He was half serious, I think, half joking yesterday when he, introducing their new athletic director and said, look, we spent 140 million on facilities. I almost wonder if we should just give that money straight to the players. I think players today just want the money. They're not going to be as worried about the facility. So yeah, NIL is still developing and still emerging, but where does it end? Do you have any idea?
Does it end? I
Yeah.
don't know if it does end, Reed.
Yeah.
He's got a very valid point. I mean, they care much more about their own salary than they do the gymnasium or the weight room. That's a given. They need to get it standardized, and Caitlin Clark has always been my, poster girl for NIL, because nobody knew her in high school outside of Iowa or Iowa high school, and she earned that NIL money, and she became the face of not just college women's basketball, but probably the WNBA as well. And so she earned it, and I think that's how NIL was intended, not to be recruiting incentive. But we were all, if we're being candid, we all knew it would be used as an incentive in recruiting, which is not what it was designed for. The thing I wonder about is that, Reed, if you were like this oil billionaire, of course you wouldn't be talking to me right now, but if you were and you're a UT grad, same as me, and you want to give $1 million to a quarterback to come to play for the Longhorns, and then he leaves in a year and transfers to Auburn, I don't know, what's your incentive to keep giving that kind of money? And we may see it slow down a little bit because of the revenue sharing with athletes, where, what do you, 22, 23 million a year that the top schools are probably going to start sharing with their athletes. So basically they're virtual employees. So it's like, well, if the school's paying them, the schools are going to need more money. So they're going to tell their donors, give it to us, and then we'll disperse it to the athletes. So maybe it'll slow down, somewhat, but I don't think anybody can truly predict where it goes.
Yeah. Well, one other sport we haven't talked about, women's basketball, Vic Schaefer. The SEC they certainly, with South Carolina and LSU, they're a good women's basketball conference, and he's from the SEC as well. So
he did, came from Mississippi State and A&M, has also coached at Arkansas for a while, so he knows that really well. And he had basically the freshman of the year, Madison Booker, last year, and she took over when Roy Harmon went down with her knee injury. So Roy will be back. I don't know. He thinks that she'll be ready for the season opener. So that'll be an interesting pairing because, Madison Booker, she was great with the ball in her hand. So how they interact is going to be really interesting. And I know they get 2 games with Dawn Staley and South Carolina Gamecocks. So I'm sure Vic was thrilled about that. And they get Kim Mulkey and LSU coming in to Austin. But you talk about an intense coach. That's Vic Schaefer. And his front court maybe not as great as he would like it to be either. But yeah, he's on the fast track, and he's intense, and he's motivated to win that national championship. Came close to Mississippi State a couple times and knocked off UConn and ended their long winning streak. So, like I said, if Del Conte wants you to be top 10 in competition and contention for a national championship. Doesn't matter what the sport is across the board, and I think Vic's in line with that.
Yeah. Just scrolling back up to another question here, made me think of the new basketball arena, Moody, but reader was asking, what do you miss about when Austin was a quote quaint college town? And are there any places that you still visit in Austin that take you back to the old days?
Well, Matt's El Rancho is one of my favorite haunts. Now, it was on First Street, which is now Cesar Chavez Street, and then it moved to South Lamar. And that's where Daryl had some of his Monday press conferences when I was first starting out at the Daily Texan covering the football team. So, I was thinking about that. I don't know how many old people like me are on this call, but like Sid's Restaurant was on Lamar. You had the best chicken fried steak and loaded baked potatoes you could ever have. And then the Stallion. You came probably too late for the Stallion, but
I was a Stallion person as a freshman. I know that.
oh my God, they'd have like 2 chicken fried steaks for like $1.50 or something. You'd want to eat every meal there. But the Hole in the Wall, Orange Bowl were haunts there on the drag. And in 1969, I was a freshman at UT, and that was, of course, the game of the century at Arkansas. And I was one of those crazy students that was on the drag celebrating the win over Arkansas 15-14, and there were only about 20,000 of us. So even saw cops drinking that night. So that was a wild affair.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we'll probably go ahead and wrap up here, but I've had a few comments. People here are certainly happy that you're with the Chronicle now, and I know this may be a little hard to answer, but how hard was it to leave the Statesman? I know you're very loyal to Austin and have been there for a very long time.
Well, I love the people at the Statesman. I still do. I still subscribe to the Statesman as well as the Houston Chronicle, and it was a difficult summer, but I will say this: the opportunity to come work for a prestigious company like Hearst and a great paper like the Houston Chronicle and such a great sports center, you're so easy to work with. It's just been, it's been about 2 months now. And this is my first trip to the building, so I'm just still kind of finding my way around here. But it was a little difficult, but I don't know. I just, if you can't make a change at my age, when are you going to make it? So I'm just privileged to be able to work for the Chronicle, and hope I do a decent job for y'all.
Yeah, no, well, thank you. Well, two things that we're going to have new this year, and people may have seen some of these teasers for it, but Kirk will be doing a newsletter, so you can subscribe to that, which right now the plans is for that to hit your mailbox on Monday mornings. And so we'll have little bonus material, stuff that maybe you don't see on the website or in the paper. So we'll have that. And then we're going to debut a new SEC power rankings. So we're going to have a Texas-sized power rankings for the SEC. SEC just thought they were good. Now they have Texas, so we'll see how that goes. So
they're going to be running things, as we all know. Oh, we need questions for the newsletter, right?
That's right. So yeah. So if anybody, Kirk will answer reader questions once a week in his newsletter. So feel free to email him. It's kbohls@houstonchronicle.com. So
no, it's Kirk. Kirk
Bohls. That's right. I'm sorry. That was your old Statesman address.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Kirk.Bohls.
Kirk.Bohls@houstonchronicle.com. You think I would know that?
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah. So
so anyway,
confused here. There you go. So anyway, well, we appreciate everyone taking your time today. And someone asks, will a recording of this be available? And I believe we do make one and often put it, if we do, we'll make sure we'll put a link in some of Kirk's stories so you can read back on that. So, well, we thank you. We'll say goodbye for now. We'll try to get Kirk safely back to Austin this afternoon, and so he can start doing a little more work for you. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.